Yeah, it's kind of a mixture between skunk and rancid meat.
Hey, pass me a beer.
Look, at least promise me you won't drink.
It's sawdust and epoxy.
There you go.
Epoxy
He's huffing
dust.
epoxy.
Alcohol always leads to trouble.
Hey, who wants to play Drink the Beer?
Right here.
Let's just have to live with it, folks. Tonight, I am
That's
drinking...
not how it happened.
Shut up. Nobody cares.
You win!
All right, what do I win?
Another beer!
Just have a cup of coffee.
There it is.
Coffee?
Beer.
I'd kill for a beer.
Cheap beer and a sympathetic ear. Step right up.
What is up, everybody? How you doing? It's Adam here with Bearded Hops, and of course, you can see right there on the screen above me is Chad. What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, Adam? How you doing tonight?
Doing good. Tonight's going to be a little different because our fearful companion, I would call him fearless, but he's not. Our fearful companion, who usually sits right next to me, Jake, had to travel for work. So he is not here. Just us.
Damn work, man. It keeps getting in the way for
work gets in the way of drinking.
each of us at times.
My time's coming. I will be traveling at some point here. So tonight is just Chad and I holding down the fort. And we also have David Nilsen coming on, who's Cicerone certified, and does some other stuff. We'll talk with him about what he does. But first, we're going to drink some beer.
We'll drink some beer.
Burrs. So we're doing a little different here because we wanted to. How about that?
Yeah, we just this
bit.
show just like free flows.
Yes, it's an evolution, if you will. Chad's going to be doing that on me. So just get used to that, really. I mean, here's the thing.
I hope not.
If you don't follow Chad on his other YouTube channel, Wisco Boater, then you might be like, this dude has emphysema. He keeps smoking. What's his problem? No, the thing is...
the last two podcasts, nothing but coughing.
Exactly. He's really just coughing because he inhales a lot of... What is it?
Well, it ain't weed.
Well, no, that's... What is it?
Well, it was an accident.
Don't lie to the people. Just tell me what it is. I'll explain the story. You tell me what it is. I'll explain it. You tell me what you're inhaling.
It's sawdust and epoxy.
There you go. He's
Epoxy
huffing
dust.
epoxy. That's what he's doing. He's huffing epoxy in his garage. So we'll just have to live with it, folks. Tonight, I am drinking...
That's not how it happened.
Shut up. Nobody cares. I am drinking a beer. Alaskan... Is it Alaskan Brewing Company? Is that who it is? My gosh. Ooh, I just missed the Best By date here, too, kids. So we'll see how this goes.
It's Alaskan. It's Alaskan.
Alaskan. It's a Husky IPA. And this one is Brewers Mosaic India Pale Ale. Now, it says best drink by 2/28/19.
Oh, yeah. You're just a few days.
Cutting it close. That's the one I'm cracking. What are you drinking?
And I have got MKE Brewing, Milwaukee Brewing Company, Grand Madam. This is a brandy barrel-aged barley wine.
And apparently this got shook up a little bit because kind of exploded.
Oh, you're just having all kinds of trouble.
It's don't tell my wife. It's on the new carpet. Don't tell my wife.
Oops.
Uh-oh.
Well, good thing you got that expensive Scotch guarding protection or whatever.
I don't know, did we? I just handed over the credit card. So we forgot this part.
My name is Chad.
There you go. So what was yours again? Yours a barley wine?
Yeah, brandy barrel-aged barley wine.
Brandy barley. Have you had this one before?
I have had this one
You
before.
have had this one before. I was going through my multiple beer fridges, trying to figure out which one I was going to do. And I wanted to do one I hadn't had. So this is the one that a friend of mine gave me a beer box for Christmas with 12 beers in it. And this was one that he picked out.
Oh, okay.
So. Thanks, John.
Well, I was trying to do the same thing. There is nothing in my beer fridge or on my beer shelf that I have not had yet, except the 2015 Goose Island Bourbon County and the Game of Thrones beers. But
yeah,
we're not opening those
Game
yet.
of Thrones beers yet. Nope, can't do that one yet. That's for Game of Thrones.
So yeah, I had to just choose one that I thought sounded delicious.
Makes sense. Yeah. So, there's not really much on this bottle for this guy. Just, hey, if you're pregnant, don't drink this. I'm not, as far as I know. Haven't checked lately. And
Have you seen how you look?
I know, right? You wouldn't be able to know. This was brewed and bottled in Juneau, Alaska. So, are these owned by anybody?
Sorry, that was a crude joke.
It's okay. Sorry, you can laugh at my expense. I'm okay with that.
Alaskan?
Yeah.
I can't answer that. I honestly do not know.
I'm going to Google it real quick because...
Yeah, do the googly Googles.
I don't know. It's independent. It's independently owned. I was just wondering because they're all the way in Alaska and they're distributing down to here. So I'm just trying to figure out how they got that distributing.
Yeah, you see those everywhere. I see
That's
Alaska
what I mean. That's why I'm like
a lot of places.
Yeah.
How is
screen over because
I missed it. Did you take your first ship?
I did. It's a IPA. I mean, it just tastes like a normal IPA.
Just an IPA.
Nothing fantastical about it. I mean, if you're an IPA person, you really like the IPAs, you might like this one. Nothing bad about it, but it's like every other IPA. So
well, I'm about 10 inches away from my glass of barley wine, and I can smell it from here.
Is that good or bad?
That's good.
Okay.
It's got a fantastic aroma. I don't actually remember exactly what this one tastes like. I did look it up to see when the last time I had it was. It was back in December, and we're in the first part of March. And I gave it a 4.75. So I'm kind of hot to trot on it. So we'll see.
What's kind of funny, I just had a coworker of mine. Well, two stories. Today, I was in a meeting with a coworker. He's in California, and he said, "Hey, I listened to the show."
Oh, that's good.
So, Matt, if you're listening, hi Matt, thanks for listening.
Hi Matt.
Second one is I have another coworker who also listens to the show. He just messaged me and said, "By the way, any chance you have an extra bottle of Cuvée from Three Sheeps?" Fuck no, we don't. Nope.
Nope, we were extremely lucky to get the two we got.
I pretty much responded, haha, 2019, not a chance.
Yeah.
I don't have any left anymore, so Brent. Sorry, Brent. No Cuvée.
None. I'm not gonna say that.
Not gonna say that?
Nope.
You're self-censoring yourself?
Yep.
You're such a big boy. You've grown up so much.
I know.
Way to go. Good job.
I do learn from time to time.
Yeah, occasionally. Yeah, you do. So, Jake, just want to play this for you.
It's Jake from State Farm.
Because we miss you. I miss your nasty-ass smell sitting next to me.
Ooh, yeah. That's something I really, that's usually a treat for me when I come down to the Beard Hop studio.
Smelling Jake?
And, yeah, the smell of Jake.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixture between skunk and rancid meat.
I'm going to be interested to see how you guys talk about me next week when I'm not here.
There's been many times when you haven't been here. We talk lovingly. This probably would have been better had I drinking it before its time. Because there's a little tiny bit of funk. You know what I mean? Like when a beer gets kind of old, there's a little funk to it.
Yeah, and IPAs can do that.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you don't... I mean, you're supposed to drink them as fresh as possible, and I'm already drinking it after the suggested drink-by date, so...
Well, I didn't have anything to worry about.
Yeah, yours didn't have to anything to worry about.
Mine, I mean, mine will be good for probably, good 5-6 years or more, but
right.
There's no reason to let it sit that long when you got this good of a beer sitting on the shelf.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've just been waiting for an opportunity to drink it. And tonight's the opportunity.
I think you did a great job. Great choice.
It's delicious. I don't know why I didn't rate this one a 5. I love it. Absolutely love it.
So one thing I just did, because I was going to go to David Nilsen's website, who's going to be on here in about, 25 minutes? I didn't know this. Did you know there's a Dennis Nilsen who comes up instead? Last name is spelled the same. Who is a Scottish serial killer and necrophile.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
That's not what you want to be clicking on.
Right. He murdered at least 12 young men in a series of killings committed between 78 and 83 in London.
Well.
Wow. I wonder if there's any relation.
Well, we can ask him.
We can ask that. I'm not sure how you broach that subject, but
We'll just ask him.
how's your old cousin Dennis.
I don't know. I don't know why I went up to the microphone to clear my throat. That was really stupid.
That was kind of, yeah.
I am stupid.
If you haven't heard already, last week we talked to Greg Avola from Untapped. That was a really fun one. Before that, we talked to those Three Sheeps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Grant from Three Sheeps. That was
Carl.
or as Jake calls him, Carl. That was a really fun one. We really liked that one as well. And we have David this week. Next week, Chad is gone, but we will have Kyle. Right, Kyle?
Yep.
Yeah,
Kyle Wolf
Yeah.
from No Hype Beer Review.
From No Hype Beer Reviews. He'll be back on.
He's great to talk to.
He's fun.
I really enjoy talking to him. I'm sad I'm going to miss it, actually.
Yeah. If you have some free time, you could call in. You never know.
Not on this trip, man.
Well,
My schedule's going to be booked up tighter than my asshole.
It's not very,
Probably should edit that part out.
It's not very tight. I'm not editing that either. And then after that, we have, I think, Beer by the Numbers from YouTube is going to be on.
That sounds right.
And then after that, Tasting Niche is going to be on. And that's all we have booked out.
We think so.
Right
We're pretty sure we have Niche.
Yeah, I got to lock that.
She has confirmed she will do the podcast,
It's
but
just
we
time.
have yet to confirm a time. So
Yeah.
And then if anybody has any suggestions on who you want to talk to, who you would like us to try and reach out to talk to, get in touch with us on Twitter or Instagram or
Facebook now?
email, Facebook. Adam's monitoring Facebook.
Yeah,
Let us know.
Yeah, we brought we resuscitated the Facebook page, so facebook.com/beardedhops. It was pretty much dead, but we got there just in time to administer CPR and save it. So
You saved
so-
the day. Save the Facebook day.
Yeah, so that is so you can definitely go there. Facebook's your thing. If Twitter's your thing, we have the Insta as well. So let us know. I did put it out on Twitter and got nobody responded to me. So assholes, bunch of dicks on Twitter.
People, use your fingers. Yeah, to type on your phone.
Oh, I'm just waiting for somebody to finish there because I didn't know what that was.
That's why I paused. On
I won't talk nice to you.
That was really loud.
and I want to fornicate with you.
So David Nilsen actually pulled up his website here. I kind of like the first thing on his website. It's davidnilsenbeer.com. Expert beer knowledge minus the snobbery. I like that.
Yeah, he's got a really nice website. I perused it quite a bit in the last couple of days. He's got a couple of good quotes, and I mean, he's got a lot of things that he does, and I'm interested to talk to him about what it is he actually does. I want to talk about the Cicerone program. You know, obviously you and I have been interested in possibly doing that in the past and maybe in the future, but I want to talk about that. And he does a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he is a beer writer. So like I said, Cicerone, certified Cicerone, a beer writer, calls himself a beer educator. So, yeah, I mean, if you look on his calendar of events, he pretty much has something going on all the time. So, and he's a regular contributor. Let's see. I don't know, it doesn't really say. When you hit his website, you do writing, davidnilsen.com/writing, you'll see all of his stuff. He's got a lot of stuff in there. So, Porch Drinking, Ohio Magazine, morebeer.com, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. So, a lot of good publications there. So, been nice.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, and he's mostly in Ohio. I know he did come to the south side of Chicago, or was right there on the line of Illinois, Indiana there a little while ago, but it was too far for me to drive to go down there. But when you look at his events page, yeah, it's all Ohio. So, if you're in
Well, I'm guessing that he lives in Ohio.
Yes.
Well, yes, he does. My barley wine that I'm drinking, it's as I said, it's a brandy barrel aged barley wine. It is an 11.5% A Bear. The hops they use are Bravo and East Kent Gold. It's got a IBU rating of 50, which doesn't matter. We know that, Jake.
Well aware.
It does have the hair on this microphone is driving me crazy.
Seriously, when are you gonna fix that? Because, folks, if you don't watch Friday Morning Beer Review,
I know.
I don't know what's wrong with you, but every Friday Morning Beer Review, you can see him picking his damn hair out of his. I was gonna say muff, but that doesn't sound right. Out of his microphone.
Well, I mean, it's what it is.
Microphone muff. Yeah.
I will tomorrow morning, or not tomorrow morning. Tomorrow's Thursday. Friday morning, I will pick the hair off my muff before I go on.
So horrible.
And record. But speaking of Friday Morning Beer Review, that's the one beer in my fridge that I haven't had yet, but I couldn't drink it because it's for Friday Morning Beer Review. But it's a Raison d'Extra. It looks like raisin, so it's very, very highly raisiny. Is that the way to put that?
I would say so, but you do you.
But it's funny that and I'm reading the description on this barley wine, and the first thing they say that this barley wine has is aromas of raisin, dates, and figs. Give way to flavors of tobacco and molasses, finishing with a warm stickiness and a hint of coffee. I don't get the coffee in this one at all. It is a very
clear your throat.
God damn.
It is a very
nicely balanced barley wine. It's got a good sweet flavor, some fruitiness to it. But it's not like I think that probably comes from the brandy barrel aging. Where you get those a little bit of a fruit note on it. But the tobacco and molasses flavors, very, very nicely balanced. You got to try this one. It's fantastic.
But I don't like raisin.
I don't like raisins either, but it's not like I'm drinking a raisin.
No? It's not like that?
No.
Okay. Well, keep
We got to go to MK Brewing Company.
Put it on the list, man.
It's on the list.
No. All right, then. All right, well, before we go talk to David, Chad, what would you rate your beer on the old Untaparino?
I'm going to jump this one right on up to the top at a 5.
Now,
I checked it in.
You had it before. What did you say you rated it?
My two previous check-ins were 4.5 and 4.75, but I know for sure the first time I had it, it was cold, and I rated it a 4.5, and then I drank it at room temp and rated it a 4.75, and I made a note that says, keep this one out of the refrigerator. Much better warm.
Better warm, yeah.
And I don't recall what I would have knocked it a quarter point for before, because it's delicious.
Like we said before, there's so many factors. I'm pretty sure David will tell us the same thing. What'd you eat? What'd you have to eat earlier? Or even the environment in which you're in. We've talked about that before. How being at the brewery, you tend to rate things a little bit higher in most cases.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if it's a special beer.
Right. Especially then when you're sitting at home. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I this is the third time I've had it. I know that all three times I've had it here at my house, but I think you probably have a really good point there. It probably depends on what you've had to eat.
Yeah, I think
don't
let me forget. That'll be a good question to ask him.
Yeah, it will be. Because maybe that, I mean, I had orange ruffy stuffed orange ruffy tonight, which is it's a flavorful fishy fish.
Fishy fish.
And, maybe that influenced how I'm tasting this, how I'm experiencing the brandy aging or something out of this one. But I think it's freaking delicious.
I almost think it's not fair of me to rate this one because it's after the date,
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm sure it's probably not tasting like it's supposed to taste.
Yeah. So I'm not even going to bother rating this one because that's my fear. Because as it is right now, it would probably be like a 2 or a 2.25. You know, it wouldn't really be very high at all.
Yeah,
I have
that's
a
not
feeling. Yeah, I have a feeling if it was fresher, it would be mucho beer.
fair. Yeah, I think you're probably right.
So I won't do that to you, my Alaskan Eskimo friends. All right, well, that's it for the beer tasting section. Let's hang out for a second. We'll be right back and with David Nilsen.
Enjoy the interview. Welcome back, everybody. We have David Nilsen with us, who is a beer writer and educator. We're going to ask him some questions tonight about his career in the beer industry and more specifically the Cicerone program. But I want to say welcome, David. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And we're pronouncing it right. Nilsen, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Kind of an unusual spelling, but pretty normal pronunciation.
Have you Googled your name?
We're going to start with this.
We're going to come right out of the gate with this one.
I actually have a Google alert set up for my name. So I have found some interesting people who share it from time to time, popping up in the news.
Yeah, the first one, I was going to your website. For whatever reason, I just didn't remember. It's davidnielsenbeer.com. I just typed in David Nilsen, and the first thing that came up was Dennis Nilsen, who was a serial killer. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, no, that's not the right person. So it's a serial killer in London.
Well, what's funny, or not funny, I guess, is that I had an uncle who was actually named Dennis Nilsen.
Oh, really?
He passed away a few years ago, but we did not know about his namesake at the time.
Yeah, he wasn't in London in the 70s, was he? Because that's when this happened.
Not that I know of.
Well, that's good. That's good. So, I mean, really, how did you? Well, I guess is this your full-time job? Is doing the beer?
Yes,
okay.
I write and speak about beer for a living.
That's the dream right there, kids. That's the dream.
Absolutely.
How did you get into that?
It's a lot of fun, but it's also a ton of work. I don't think I've ever worked harder in my life than I have since I started working for myself. I like to joke that my boss is a real asshole. He doesn't let me get away with that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, what did you do before you got into the? I mean, we'll talk about what you're doing now, but I'm always interested to know what people did before their current, not I want to say a position, but it's your own employment in the beer industry.
Right. Well, I wasn't professionally involved in beer before I started doing this. I've worked a variety of jobs. Never actually finished college, so just kind of picked up jobs in my 20s. Worked at a bank doing completely soul-sucking IT work for close to a decade.
Hey, that's me. I do soul-sucking IT work as well. Yeah, that's what I do right now. I feel
Cheers, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Have another drink.
Yeah.
Anyway, and to all my coworkers listening, I don't mean it about this job. That's a different job.
No, of course not. So then after that, that honestly became a little too much. So I left and started working at a library. Started doing like adult programming for them and led a classic film series and started, I was into beer, of course, and learning all about it and started a small tasting program there at the library. And then a few months later, I decided that it was time to move on and kind of start working for myself. And so I left the library at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, and started doing this full time.
But you've been doing you've been involved for what on your website says 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I've been casually involved in the sense that I've been, doing some beer writing, limited beer writing and limited events for several years, but not kind of just as a little side thing. I've mostly hit the ground running about 3 years ago, starting to pick this up more intensely.
And when you say you were into beer while you're working at the library, were you just drinking as much as you could, or were you home brewing? Were you what were you doing?
Well, of course, we're all drinking as much as we can.
Exactly,
Of it.
yeah.
But along with that, I mean, any interest that I've ever picked up, whether that's been professional or just for my own edification, I always kind of dove in on the intellectual end of it and wanted to consume as much knowledge as I possibly could. So I don't really pick up hobbies or interest and just sort of toy around with them. I tend to really dive in and do as much reading and absorb as much as I possibly can. So I was always kind of coming at it as a student of beer, even when I wasn't heavily involved in it from a, say, a vocational standpoint.
That's great.
What? Well, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but
Oh boy, I already asked about a serial killer family. What do you want, man? Jeez.
I'm curious about how old you are, because the Cicerone certification process is I mean, it's not obviously not age dependent, but I wonder how your tastes were at whatever age you got your Cicerone certification, and then what are there now. So if you just want to say how old you were when you got your Cicerone certification.
Well, I just got it a couple years ago, honestly. So I'm turning 37 next week. So
Okay.
I was 34 when I got my certification.
Such a young whippersnapper. Look at that. Jeez.
So as far as my tastes, I don't know that they've changed all that much. I think my interests in craft beer have kind of gotten more specific in that time. I got into craft beer drinking it probably 12 to 15 years ago. I never really went through much of a cheap 24-pack lager phase like most people did, and then had to wean off of that onto real beer. I kind of jumped right in. Like much of the country, I had kind of a bad perception of beer for a while and assumed it was just this cheap drink. And so instead of drinking shitty beer, I drank shitty wine at the time.
Yeah.
And then started drinking craft beer kind of right around when I came of legal drinking age. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, started really picking it up more seriously and trying to do what I was talking about, of being more of a student of beer and understand styles and all that different stuff. Just in the last couple years, and this has really come about, especially as I've been working in beer professionally, I've gotten some really specific interests with that, and they go along with trying to get people to understand that beer is a drink that deserves respect. It deserves a place at the table with wine and spirits. So I've been really interested in beer as an agricultural product, for one thing. I live in a small town in a primarily agricultural county. We have one brewery that just opened last summer. Otherwise, our closest breweries are about 45 minutes away. So doing events right here in this county, and I do them farther afield, but doing them right here in the county, most of the people who attend these events are pretty new to beer and aren't coming at this with a whole lot of previous experience. And so I had anticipated there being a whole lot of hand holding that needed to happen with that. And what I've been surprised with is that a lot of the vocabulary that we use, the sensory vocabulary we use for some of our beers, particularly when you get into sours and farmhouse ales and some of these more prestige type of styles, a lot of the sensory vocabulary for those is inherently rural and agricultural. And as I've been presenting those beers to folks around here, I've been really pleasantly surprised that they are very readily able to pick up a lot of aroma and flavor descriptors that folks in larger population areas where I do events maybe aren't quite so prepared to, even though they've been drinking craft beer for longer. So I've really been interested in that aspect of beer, particularly because craft beer has grown in popularity so much in cities, but the ingredients are grown on farms, and there's this disconnect between where craft beer is popular and where its ingredients come from. And being able to bridge that a little bit with that sensory vocabulary has been really exciting. So that's something that's come up just in the last couple years for me.
Yeah, and I think actually, I mean, that's a disconnect almost in all of our food production, really. You know, people have
absolutely.
no idea where their food's coming from. We're so far removed from farms. Majority of the country is. You know, for me, it's probably 20-minute drive and I'll see a farm. For me, maybe a little less than that, but that's really interesting. And so the people that you're now that you're talking about, are they mostly, then they're mostly rural families?
Yeah, primarily. So I live about a little under an hour from Dayton, which is a pretty good sized city, a little under a million people in the metro area. And so I do a lot of events down there in and around the city, but then I do, again, a lot of events up here in the county. And when I do them up here, they're either from a very small town or they actually live out in the country. So craft beer has not been marketed to them.
Right.
And
That's what I was thinking. Like, that's not really the craft beer market so much. So what is their well, I'll say, I know for me, some family that I have that are more rural, not like I'm a city slicker or anything, I don't know what I mean by that, but they turn their nose up at craft beer. It's not, but all they think of is an IPA. They think of bitter,
Right.
they think of, you know, those type of beers, and they're used to, you know, the Miller Lite, Coors Light type, having that in their diet all the time. So what are the initial reactions of people when you present them with
so
beer?
those beers, those macro brands still dominate here in the county.
Yeah.
The few craft breweries that have come into this rural area, and again, we only have the one right here in our county. There's a county north of us, though, and this is kind of one of the weird aspects of sociological history around here. The county north of us is predominantly German Catholic. It was heavily settled by German immigrants in the 1800s, more so than our county here, even though it's only a half-hour drive. And they drink a lot more beer up there. So they've got three breweries that are pretty well established just in that rural county that, you know, you wouldn't even know you crossed the line. Both of them are primarily agricultural. But those three breweries have been able to thrive up there, but they're primarily thriving on sort of older generation craft styles. So pale ales and porters and cream ale and some not too challenging IPAs and milk stouts. And they're not really pushing the boundaries too much with the current craft beer trends. And they've been able to survive from their local drinkers on those types of styles. So here in our county, while we don't have any breweries really piggybacking on that, the same sorts of trends sort of dominate. So the handful of restaurants and bars that are able to stock a good selection of craft beer and maybe have a dozen or so taps or something like that, they're primarily running on sort of those classic craft styles and sort of easing people in that way. That said, you know, it's a small place, and the fact that I do a lot of events has pulled along a certain group of people. So you're starting to get more acceptance of newer wave IPAs and Belgian styles and some session strength sour stuff. We're still kind of trying to get people used to the more prestigious sours and things like that. But definitely the county is still dominated by those macro brands. But you're starting to see more inroads. Dayton, about an hour away, has a fantastic and frankly underrated beer scene. Close to 20 breweries there in the city, and people are starting to head down there more and kind of get their fix on those breweries, and even if they live up here. So things are starting to change. There's a brewery over in Columbus, which is about 2 hours away from us, called North High. And they recently, just a couple months ago, released a beer in collaboration with the Ohio Farm Bureau, and they're going to be releasing it all year round. This is the 100th anniversary for the Farm Bureau that supports farmers around the state. And it's this super low strength, like 4%, sessionable blonde ale, not real challenging. And that beer is getting pushed out into rural markets that have never even considered craft beer because of its tie-in with the Farm Bureau. So there's like these rural grocery stores that sell nothing but Coors Light and the ilk that are selling out of cases of this beer from a Columbus craft brewery just because of that tie-in. So there's definitely an availability there for people to start picking out better beer. I've always thought it was ironic in the worst possible way that rural, hardworking, blue collar folks who are farming the ground believe that a beer from Anheuser-Busch represents them in
Right.
some way.
Yeah.
The beers that are from smaller businesses that are struggling along just like you are, that are hopefully supporting a better form of agriculture, those beers should be representing you, and trying to get people to recognize that as a challenge, but it's happening slowly.
Do you think that's a sticker shock though? Like, you can go in, you can buy a case of Bud Light for, $14, and there's some 6-packs of craft beer you can't even touch for under 12.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think it has to be on some level, but I think that's something more to hide behind. I don't think that's actually a barrier in the way that it sometimes gets held up as, because if they're drinking bourbon or wine or something else like that,
point.
They're certainly paying that.
That's true.
So I think it kind of gets held up a little bit as like this, oh, it costs too much, but no, it doesn't really. I mean, it costs a little bit more. It's still the most affordable option if you're drinking alcohol.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, you spend $14, $15 to get a decent bottle of local wine,
Mm-hmm.
and you're getting 750 milliliters, which is 3 glasses typically.
Right.
Maybe 4 if you're
2 for you. You got a big glass.
2 for me. But yeah, I mean, as far as the amount you get for your money, it still is a great value.
Yeah.
You brought up an interesting point when you were talking there about the rural breweries that are in that county north of you.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they aren't really stretching their legs to see what else they could brew. I mean, they're sticking with the traditional stuff. And I'm very guilty of this, but I never really gave it a thought. Like, if we go to a brewery in the Milwaukee or North Chicago area, I'm not. Now this has changed. Started to change a little bit recently, but in the past year or so, I would never go for a beer that they have labeled on their menu as a lager or even an Oktoberfest. I'm not even really that. Haven't been interested in Oktoberfest, which is a old Marzen.
Mm-hmm.
And these traditional beers that are being enjoyed by a rural area just would not. That type of brewery just would not wouldn't honestly wouldn't make it. And it's not to say it's great for where they're at. But if you put a brewery like that in a more urban environment, I can't imagine that they would be successful, because you have to have a variety of newer styles and something that people have never heard of before, because they're going to the brewery to have an experience, and new styles are something that's a part of that experience. And it's been the way it's been for me. If I see something on a menu and I've never heard of this style before, I got to try that.
Right.
You know, I'm definitely going to go for that over the traditional porters or cream ales, or name your traditional flavor.
Yeah. We just finished up Flagship February, and that came about specifically because a beer writer recognized that all of these heritage craft brands were flagging a bit, and they're still great beers, but they're not new and they're not always exciting. I absolutely love Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and I'll drink it as often as I can. But when you're going into a bottle shop and there's 1,000 different bottles, well, I know what Sierra Nevada Pale Ale tastes like. I don't know what this other beer over here tastes like, so I'm going to get that maybe. And there's a balancing point. Craft beer has from the beginning been about both reviving traditions, but also innovating and pushing boundaries.
Yep.
And doing too much of one at the expense of the other creates problems in either direction. So you need those classic styles. You need well-made examples of those beers. You also need to innovate and create new flavors and find where those frontiers of beer are. So doing too much of one or the other is not healthy for the industry as a whole. It's not healthy for us as drinkers. We need to be able to keep those things in balance. And here where we are in this rural area, we're still trying to establish what those classic styles even are, because for us, a pale ale's old news. For someone just coming to this, a pale ale is what pale ale was for us a couple decades ago.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a balance to be found there for sure.
Yeah, and I mentioned that my profile, what I look for is started to change, and you brought up the classic, the renewing the classic styles, and that's something that just recently in the last few months I've definitely come back around to being interested in, because it was pretty much all, barrel aged beers last year. As me and Adam and Jake, our podcast was pretty much based on barrel aging, and we still love those beers, but I'm kind of starting to swing back a little bit. I think we overcorrected just a little bit.
Sure.
I'm kind of starting to swing back the other way. And recently I've just been looking for, traditional craft pilsners and lagers. I've got several different varieties in my refrigerator right now.
Well, you're on the hunt right now to find one that would compare with these macro guys, right?
Specifically Miller Lite. I mean, that's the local macro here. And I don't mind a Miller Lite on if it's a hot day, it's refreshing, it's crisp. It's not a bad beer.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been on a mission to find a craft equivalent that's not like too far like over the top with flavor to where you lose that refreshing, crisp taste, or something that's not just completely on the other side watered down. So it's been interesting, to try and come back around to that style of beer after having been away from, like, not even showing an interest in it in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of in the nature of trends within craft beer. I mean, we're seeing that across the industry with, New England IPA, and to a lesser extent, something like Brut IPA. Everybody chases whatever the new thing is, and it happens at the expense of beers that taste really fucking good. They're just not new and exciting,
Right.
and but with the lagers, we're starting to see, well, not even starting, we are in the middle of a resurgence of those, and I don't think that's really a trend. I've expressed at a few places that I think that is more a natural maturation of the segment of craft beer in general. The aversion that we had to lager for several decades was always somewhat artificial, because it was about a rebellion against what beer had been forced to be in this country for, half a century before that. And so when craft beer came about, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to make all these, big flavorful ales. And that was always, that was probably important for a little while, but it was always somewhat artificial because lager tastes really good. And so at some point, we were all going to figure out that the liquid wasn't the problem. It was, a scorched earth business plan for 50 years that wiped out all flavorful beer in the country and happened to leave us with these light lagers. The beer itself wasn't the problem. So we're starting to get all those, light, easier drinking lagers back, and I'm thrilled about it. And I think that that's going to stick around for a long time.
Yeah, it does seem like that trend for sure. Lagers, you see a lot more craft lagers, craft breweries putting out the lagers. And we've talked to a couple, we've talked to head brewer of Three Sheeps up in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And we've seen it also with other brewers and even in other beer articles, but the other trend happening now is the lower ABV, going to something more sessionable. You know, and if Jake were here, he'd be crying and moaning right now because he chases the highest ABV possible. And as a matter of fact, he won't buy a beer if it's not above a certain ABV for the most part. So,
for the most part, yeah.
For the most part, he will rate a beer lower because the ABV is too low for him. So
That's too bad for him.
That is an interesting trend, though. I mean, it's a way to try and keep similar flavors to beers you've made in the past, but make it so you're not just going to the brewery and having one. You know, so they're bringing down like the example here that we're talking about is a beer called Veneration, and it was a 13.6, I think.
Yeah, years past.
In years past, and now it's down to 10, and you know the flavor's still there, but it's a little bit different, and that was what they're trying to go for is have somebody come in on a Thursday night and not order just one Veneration. You want them to sit there and have a couple, and then make that go towards something else. So.
Yeah. I mean, strong beers can be a ton of fun and they can be delicious, but so can those low strength beers. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little past the age of thinking it's just a ton of fun to get absolutely drunk and then pay for it the next day. So being able to have a long evening where I can have multiple beers and not feel like garbage the next day is a lot of fun.
Well, what I've discovered is as you get older, you do not recover from those hangovers as nearly as well as you used to.
Yeah. Well, and Adam and I are both in our early 40s.
Yeah.
Jake is a little bit behind us, but he's starting to think a little bit different too. I think I'm not going to speak for him, but
no.
I mean, we all love to drink our alcohol, but
what used to take you, run out, get the McDonald's, get the greasy breakfast, and you're over it and you're fine. Now it's like, no, I'm in bed all day. I'm not getting out of bed today.
It's just not. It's not fun.
No, it's not.
Not worth it. And honestly, all it really takes is just being a little smarter and slowing down a little bit. Have one or two fewer drinks across the course of a long evening, and enjoy those lower strength beers. It's not like you have to become a prude and go down to one beer or something, but just be smart. Don't be you're not 23 anymore. Don't be an idiot.
Exactly right. Now you mentioned the Brut IPAs. That is one that I've been really liking. Whenever I find a different one in the store, I usually will try to grab it because I've been liking them so far. And I've read some people say, well, it's going to be a very quick fad. It won't last very long at all. Some people said, no, it's here for a long time. What's your take on the Brut kind of phase?
So, Brut came in sort of right behind the bigger wave of New England IPA that, rushed across the country in the last year or two. I think the New England IPAs, while I don't know that we definitely have them forever, at least not at the pace we do now, I think they have some more staying power. I do think the Brut IPAs we will probably see recede a little bit more quietly in the next year or two. I don't think they're going to go away. Somebody's going to keep brewing one.
Yeah.
But I think that the most interesting thing about Brut IPA is what it can tell us about how mouthfeel influences flavor. I think it's useful as a sensory tool. You've got the exact same hopping rate in this beer, but it's an almost gravity of one, finishing gravity of like 1.00 or whatever. Versus you have an IPA that's got a more classic malt profile with the exact same hop rate. How do you perceive those flavors differently? I think that's interesting. But in terms of the long-term lasting power of the style, I don't know that we're talking about Brut IPAs much in 2 or 3 years. There'll still be some around, but I don't think they probably have the ability to woo new craft drinkers in the way that New England IPAs have brought in some people that maybe weren't into craft before. I think it's an inherently more esoteric style. It's very dry, it's very crisp. If people like champagne, they're going to drink champagne. If people like dry, light lager, they're going to drink dry, light lager. I don't think Brut IPA brings a whole lot of new people in. And I don't think it probably controls enough beer geeks' attention once the next shiny thing comes along for it to actually hold its place. So They're the good. I mean, it's like any style. The good examples are good. The bad examples are bad.
Yeah.
And I think we probably have fewer examples as a whole 2 or 3 years from now.
Yeah, and I was actually on our last episode. I talked about this. I recently went to what am I? The beer fair? What am I?
Beer fest.
Beer fest. That's beer fair. Why am I thinking beer fair? It was on the fairgrounds. But I've been to several before, but this is one of the larger ones. It's in my county here, and it was pretty big. And at the end of the night, it was my wife and another couple, and we were driving home, and we all kind of made the kind of realization when you go side by side with these breweries, and there were everything from Revolution Brewing, a larger brewery in Chicago, to Miller was there too, but then you got these really, really tiny, like ones I hadn't even heard of that were apparently in the county I didn't even know about. And when you go side by side with those, you quickly realize why those breweries that are medium to larger size are that way, and why those small guys are that way. The taste is just so dramatically different between those different breweries. And like you had said, with the Brut IPAs, they make a good one. They make a good one. It was to me it was a surprise because I really hadn't done that before, where I just went table to table and kind of had beers from everybody. The taste was just missing from these small guys, whereas kind of medium operators to the larger ones are more well known. Where
and they get to the point where they really know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there are definitely plenty of small breweries that are putting out phenomenal beer. We have a lot of breweries that aren't good, and it's a thing that's just starting to get talked about much. For a long time, nobody wanted to acknowledge that not all craft beer was good, because we were just so excited about the variety.
That was very taboo to talk about.
Yeah, but it's not anymore, and it's starting. We're going to see a really painful maturation of the market in the next half a decade, I think, where you're going to start getting some subpar breweries dropping out, because folks have been worried about the bubble bursting and reaching saturation point and all that for years. I don't think we're there, but I do think we're at the point where it's going to become more and more difficult to sell bad beer. And it's almost comical that to say something like that, it should have always been hard to sell bad beer, but it wasn't. You're going to start seeing breweries that don't sell good beer that can no longer compete unless they are in an isolated area where they have a dedicated, town or neighborhood where they're the brewery, and then it'll take longer for that to happen. You're also going to start seeing and it's going to be painful. I think you're going to see some of those more mid-size craft breweries that have operated for a long time on what is now a somewhat outmoded and clumsy distribution model, and they're not able to retract and reorganize with the agility that they need to get into a market where the days of wide distribution are long over, and some of them are going to close, and it's going to really fucking suck, but it's going to happen.
What do you see happening with the big guys, the AB InBev's coming in and swooping up more of like our beloved Goose Island, the bigger ones? I mean, is that a trend that, the way I'm thinking of it, either the big fish are going to keep swallowing the medium fish, or some of these medium guys are going to come and maybe start buying some of these smaller guys, but we're going to see a consolidation.
I mean, I don't know. Who knows what AB InBev wants to do? I think
I don't know if they know all the time either. So
I know you guys interviewed
advertising recently.
Yeah, you interviewed Josh Noel.
Yeah.
If you read his book, it doesn't sound like they always knew what they were doing when they were doing it.
Yeah, not at all. They had no idea.
I don't know. It sure seems like they've slowed down on buying stuff. Like maybe they're going to sit pat for a little while, but I don't know. And I go back and forth on my stuff with them. I don't agree with the idea that what's in the glass is all that matters. I think there's more that matters than that. But I don't know what they're going to do, and honestly, I've tried to stop worrying about what they're going to do. I do what you said there at the end about the bigger craft breweries making acquisitions. I think we probably will start seeing some more of that. We just in the last few years we've seen some mergers. Victory and Southern Tier came together, and you've got Oscar Blues little consortium. I forget what that's called. Sierra Nevada made their first acquisition. They just bought some little brewery I never even heard of out there. But I think we'll be seeing more of that, and it's going to come in a couple different ways. One, where larger or mid-sized craft breweries that are feeling some of the distribution pinch that I just talked about realize that they need to make a purchase in order to preserve some of their market in some places, or in order to strategically position themselves in some way. And then on the flip side of that, those same size breweries that got themselves in too deep of a hole to be able to get out of it are going to have to look at mergers in order to hold their place. And so we'll be seeing that. I couldn't even begin to prognosticate on what those will exactly be, but I would say in the next few years we'll be seeing more of those smaller purchases and mergers between breweries.
Yeah, I think it's probably just a natural progression of things. It's
natural progression of the business, really.
The business, the way the business work. I'd like to talk about the Cicerone program a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how much time you've got.
I'm good. I'm not sure how long you guys got to go, but I don't have anything planned after this, so we can talk.
That's dangerous.
Okay. We try to keep the interviews around 45 minutes to an hour. So I didn't know if we're getting to be about 40 minutes or so now. But so when you decided to do, Adam, did you have any other questions before we dive into this?
Well, I was going to actually say first, if we could explain, David, if you could explain what Cicerone is for some people who may have no idea what we're talking about. What is the Cicerone certification?
Good place to start.
Yeah. So the Cicerone Certification Program was started a little over a decade ago. I believe they launched in 2008. Ray Daniels, who's just kind of a industry guru, jack of all trades, he started that. And it was basically started to provide for beer what the Court of Master Sommeliers provides for wine. So it's a certification program that vets beer industry professionals on their knowledge, so that when they are then guiding consumers or hiring into companies, the folks on the other side of that can feel confident in the knowledge level of that particular beer professional. So there's 4 different certification levels. The entry level is the Cicerone Certified Beer Server. There are a little over 100,000 of those. That is, the exam is certainly not a pushover. It's not like, I like craft beer, so I'll just take this exam real quick and become a Cicerone Certified Beer Server. But it's not nearly as overwhelming as the other exams are. It's an online exam, takes about half an hour. And then the next level is the sort of industry standard level. That's the Certified Cicerone. That's where I'm at right now. There are just under 4,000 certified Cicerones in the world. Certified Cicerones, as I said, that's the industry standard. Like, they are kind of the flagship certification level for the program. Certified Cicerone should be someone who is able to guide consumers in navigating through the dazzling variety of craft beer today. Should be able to run a craft beer program for a bar or restaurant. The next level above that is actually what I'm preparing for right now, the advanced Cicerone level. There are currently 112 advanced Cicerones, and it sits right below the highest level, which is the Master Cicerone. There's only 18 of those, and originally,
holy shit,
yeah, no, there's
18 at the highest level.
Yeah. And when it was started in 2008, all you had was that beer server, Certified Cicerone, and Master Cicerone. And they just added the advanced level, that intermediate between certified and master, 2 or 3 years ago, because the chasm between taking the certified exam and sitting for the master exam was just so profound that it was preventing some people from wanting to take the master exam. And on the other side, it was encouraging people to take the master exam who had no business sitting for it yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So they put in the advanced exam. Ray Daniels kind of describes it as being like a higher base camp up the mountain before you're ready to summit, so that you can kind of get up and get your bearings if you're going to go on to summit at the master Cicerone level. So I'm currently in the studying process for the advanced exam. I'm hoping to take that in the next year. The certified exam, which I've I took a few years back, is a 4 or 5 hour exam. You take that in person. Most of that is written, and then you also have some tasting panels and a little bit of demonstration stuff. The advanced exam is 8 or 9 hours of written and tasting panels, and then interviews. You just get interviewed by might be Ray Daniels himself, might be Randy Mosier, some beer expert who is just kind of going to ask you whatever they want, and you've got to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. The master exam is a 2-day exam, 8 or 9 hours both days, and I am nowhere near thinking about taking that exam, so I'm just focused on the advanced exam for now.
Now I know there are a couple of those masters work for the big guys.
Yeah, there's 3 at Miller Coors.
Yeah, Miller. I was gonna say Miller's the one I see a lot of times as having.
Yeah, they have the largest concentration of any brewery. In fact, there was just, do you guys know about the Brewmaster documentary that just came out in the last few months?
I didn't know it came out. I'd heard about it, but I didn't know it came out.
Yeah, it's actually I believe it's on Amazon Prime right now to stream. But it follows one of them, Brian Reed, as he prepared to take the exam, and they kind of use his preparation just as a way to look at the the industry as a whole and the whole program and all that. But
I know what I'm watching while I work tomorrow.
Yeah, it's that is on. I don't know if I'll ever sit for that. That's on the distant horizon. I'm just focused on the next thing in front of me for now.
Yeah.
I can't believe between levels 1 and 4, you've got over 100,000 at level 1 and 18 at level 4.
It's a sharp drop off at every step. I mean, go from 100, it's like 108,000 down to just under 4,000, and then just over 100, and then 18.
Yeah.
And the Masters, what is it, like $4,000 for the test, or so? It's like
it's less than that. I think
it was a huge number.
The certified. God, I'm trying to remember. I feel like the certified exam was about 400 or 500. I think the master exam is maybe 800.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, the initial cost is $995. The retakes are $795. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, it's still
crazy.
It's not nothing, but it's not quite that prohibitive.
Crazy. How do you think, since getting your 2 levels of certification, do you feel like it has affected your, and it could be a good way or bad way, affected your enjoyment of beer in general? Like, is it more like annoying to try and figure out the flavors in a beer, which makes drinking a beer more work, or is it more interesting that makes it better? How do you feel about drinking beer now versus 3 or 4 years ago before you got this?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely been a positive, and there's a couple stages to that answer. On the one hand, as I mentioned earlier, when I dive into something, I tend to kind of jump in head first, and I want to understand it in an intellectual way. So even if I hadn't pursued my certification, I was going to be doing this. I was going to want to understand off flavors and understand ingredients and how they impact flavor and aroma and all that stuff. So this more or less just gave me a framework to be able to do that in. But beyond that, the discipline required to get the certification, and then the knowledge that came along with that, and the satisfaction, the personal, maybe satisfaction is the wrong word, the validation that came along with being able to pass that and say, all right, I do have this level of understanding of this topic, allowed me to be a lot more confident and comfortable, just even for myself, even not getting into the professional side of it, just for myself to be able to feel confidence of what I'm tasting and what my palate can recognize, because we can recognize, 10,000 aromas and so many flavors and all this, and I hear from so many people when I'm doing events, oh, I just don't have a good palate, or I just don't have a good sense of smell, or I don't have a good sense of taste. And it's like, yeah, you do. You have the same ability that we all do. It's just that you don't have a vocabulary for it. You haven't, you don't understand what all of the things are that you're smelling and tasting, and you don't have confidence. No one's ever told you that what you taste is what you taste. You just believe that you're wrong if you don't taste what I do, or you taste something else. And so getting the certification, I think, has definitely improved just my own enjoyment of it, both from the fact that it gave me the framework for being able to digest all this information, but also the validation that came along with saying, yeah, I can do this. I know these things about beer, and that's nice. I mentioned earlier that I never finished college, and throughout my 20s, I had a lot of angst about that. All my friends had degrees, and I'm an intelligent and self-educated person, and I don't have a degree. And so when I decided to take this on full time and become a beer writer and educator, I knew that getting this certification was going to be very important to me, just because it would be something that demonstrated I set my mind to a task, I worked at it, and somebody else validated that and said, yes, you did achieve this, you do have this level of knowledge. So it's meant a lot to me, and it has definitely made it more enjoyable.
Now, were you doing the classes and the tasting stuff that you're doing now before, when you had like the server, or is that something you didn't start until
long. I didn't get the server until you have to have passed each level before you can take the next exam, and you can't even register until you have the previous one in hand. So I didn't even take the beer server exam until I was registering for the certified exam a couple months before I sat for it, and I just because I needed to get it out of the way in order to register. So I hadn't gotten the beer server certification for itself, well in advance or anything like that. So I was doing events and a little bit of writing for a little while before the certification, but not all that long. I had kind of had the plan that when I was going to start doing this professionally, I was just going to jump all in on it. So getting the certification was really important to what I was doing. I don't work for a brewery. I don't have any other name to attach to what I'm doing besides my own. So if I'm going to go into a place and say, hey, you should pay me to teach your people about beer service, or you should pay me to lead a tasting for all of your customers and represent your beers at this tasting, they have absolutely no reason to believe that I know what I'm talking about without some sort of certification like that. With craft beer is kind of like it's kind of like your friend who knows about computers and then accidentally erases your hard drive because they don't actually know anything about computers. Everybody thinks they know something about craft beer. There's plenty of dude bros on bar stools who are prepared to tell you everything about craft beer, and they don't know shit. They have no idea what they're talking about. And
dude bros, that's a good term.
Right. So, and I knew that going into these places and just being like, hey, I'm David. I know a lot about beer. Like, well, sure. So does Joe down there at the end of the bar. Like, we're not paying him to teach classes. So I needed something that would make them, that would help people recognize that they could hire me with confidence to do events or to write for their publication or to train their staff on how to pair beer with food or whatever it was. So it was really important to me in that way. And I knew that I was going to need that pretty much from the beginning if I was going to jump in and start doing this as a full-time job.
What, how do you think food affects the taste of beer? Do you think that's a valid point?
Anytime you're combining flavors from anything, they're going to alter each other and influence each other and either play nicely with each other or they aren't. So beer is, and I say this as unbiased as I can, obviously beer is my preferred drink, but I firmly believe that beer is the most versatile pairing beverage that we have. I enjoy good wine. I enjoy good spirits. I don't drink nearly as much of them as I do beer, but I enjoy them. So I don't intend to step on their toes. But wine definitely has some blind spots when it comes to pairing with food, and there are things that if you get a wine professional, maybe you get enough wine in them, so they'll start talking. They might admit that wine doesn't necessarily go with everything,
Yeah.
and beer has a lot of things going for it that will allow it to work with pretty much anything if you pick the right beer. So, for one thing, and it's something we overlook and don't think about, but the carbonation of beer is a tremendous asset because carbonation will serve to scrub off a lot of flavors and textures from food that can gum up the works with some other drinks. But beyond that, there's just so much diversity of flavor in beer that anything that you might struggle to find something to go with wine, wine and chocolate is sort of this established thing, which is sort of comical because there's not many wines that work well with many chocolates, and yet you can always find a beer that's going to pull out flavors from a good bean to bar chocolate. There's some cheeses that some wines will struggle with. There are vegetables that wine will struggle with, and there's always a beer that matches. So you can get some absolutely miserable combinations between beer and food if you don't understand what you're doing with them. So I wouldn't just recommend putting any beer with any food and it's going to be a match made in heaven. But if you understand some basic principles and concepts, it's a glorious beverage with food.
Is that is the Cicerone program? Does it have any food?
Yes.
It does have a food
Yeah. So
aspect to it.
it doesn't for the beer server level, but as soon as you get into the certified level, you are tested on food pairing. And in fact, once you get into the advanced level, you start getting tested on food stuff that doesn't even have anything to do with beer. So you have to have a general
wow.
cuisine familiarity. You need to understand that hummus is made from chickpeas, and you need to understand that all these different things, because when you're getting into that level, you're going to be doing food pairing, and you can't just fake your way through that and sort of look it up on your phone while you're trying to, have a consultation or something. You need to understand when someone says that they have ceviche on their menu and they want to know what to pair it with. Well, you can't quick Google ceviche and try to figure out what to pair it with. You need to understand food. You need to know cuisine in general to be able to do that. So, yes, absolutely. You have to have a good familiarity with food, and that really gets into one of the things that I've found important for myself as I've gotten further into my enjoyment of beer. And it's really kind of advice for expanding sensory horizons if somebody wants to become a better taster, even if it's just of beer. You can't just learn about beer. You need to be tasting broadly because even if you like beer better than wine, there are beers that have flavors that are going to evoke different wines. And so having a vocabulary that can recognize when something tastes like a Riesling versus tastes like a Cab or whatever else, you need to have that vocabulary or you're going to be bumbling along wondering what that flavor is. You need to understand these different different types of coffee, different types of chocolate, different types of different fruits, different herbs. All of those are flavors and aromas that pop up in beer. So one of the things I encourage people when they're wanting to know how to become better tasters is drink and eat widely beyond beer and just pay attention while you're doing it. Go to the grocery store and buy some fruits that you're not familiar with and taste those fruits. Taste herbs. Buy some cheap, canisters of herbs. They don't have to be the highest quality, but buy some herbs that if you can't identify what thyme smells like, go buy a $3 canister of thyme and smell it, and do this stuff. And you're going to expand your sensory vocabulary and become a better taster, even if you're only doing that for the purpose of tasting beer better in a more educated way. Everything that we taste, everything that we smell is an opportunity to expand our sensory vocabulary. So having a good working knowledge of food and other beverages is important if you're going to expand your ability to taste beer at a high level.
Man, it's funny because the three of us, what we normally do on our shows, we try to pick a beer that we all have. It's easy because Jake lives across the street from me, not so easy because Chad's up north. But we try to find a beer we all have, and we start out by opening it and smelling it first and talking about what we smell, and then we'll drink it and give our first impressions, and we'll talk about whatever beer-related news we want to talk about. And then over the course of the hour of the show, we drink it and we talk about how it changed from the beginning to the end. And usually it warms up. The flavors definitely change as it warms. But the one thing that always gets us is how, Chad will taste fig, and I won't taste that at all. I'll taste vanilla, and how two people drinking the exact same thing just don't taste the same thing. That's just always fascinating when we drink, the same beer and talk about it.
Yeah. And there's a couple different things that go into that. I mean, for the one thing, we might actually process sensory input in different ways to where a flavor that expresses as fig to one person expresses as vanilla to you. The other thing, something that I find really fascinating, I'm actually giving a talk this weekend about this at an event in Dayton, is that our cultural context, and I use cultural very broadly, affects our flavor vocabulary. So when I say cultural, everything from the home that we grew up in and the homes we've lived in to the area of the country that we've lived, our ethnic background, our national background, in some cases our religious background, all of that affects the flavors and aromas that we are familiar with and that we have a vocabulary for. So going back to the very beginning when I was talking about being in a rural area and these rural folks who are new to craft beer and they're able to pick out the smell of hay or horse blanket or whatever it is in some of these really challenging sour beers, those are terms of prestige among beer geeks who are really venerating these old world lambics and things like that. And Joe the farmer is just like, is there hay in this? And because that's something he's familiar with. He's smelled that his entire life, and there's actually comfort and positive association to an aroma like that. So our backgrounds and our sensory context that we've developed across the decades influences how we perceive flavor, and it influences how we're able to describe it. And it's one of the reasons that doing what you guys are doing and tasting a beer together can be really valuable, because we all have a different crayon box that we're coloring with when we're figuring out these flavors and smells. And so being able to talk about them together allows us to learn from each other and expand our own sensory vocabulary.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't actually even thought about. For those who haven't grown up around a farm, may have no idea what a hay smells like, right? So they would never think.
So my wife is from Chicago. She grew up in the south suburbs and went to school and worked downtown, and just moved here about 5 years ago when we got married. And she loves sour beers. But when we were first talking about, Oud Guza, we were tasting through some of these Guzas, and she loves them. But I was like picking out these rural terms that I didn't even think about as being rural, the hay and barnyard and horse blanket and diesel and all these different things. And she had absolutely no context for those aromas. So we ended up taking a field trip to the county fair, and we went to, the agricultural display. We went to the horse barn. We went to all these different places so that she could smell what hay smelled like and what horse blanket smelled like and what, all these different things were. Because if you grew up in the city, you might love sour beer, but you have absolutely no idea.
No fucking clue.
So, yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
I wonder if the opposite's true. If somebody grows up on a farm, if they don't know what car exhaust smells like, and
I'm sure they know what car. Yeah.
I think
and sewage,
right?
Sewage. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's as many specific geographical things like that, but I think there could certainly be some other cultural things. If you grew up on a farm and have been, you haven't traveled too far afoot, do you really have a good understanding of papaya and mango? Do you
Right.
understand Thai spices? Do you those different things if you've been a meat and potatoes person your entire life? I don't know. I think all of that can influence the things that we're able to pick out and recognize, and I think we can learn from each other then. It's one of the great things about getting a lot of people together into a room to taste beer is you have people who can pick out all sorts of different things, and it's not always the same.
I think the city folk would be like that. That's Leo. Leo's the guy down in the corner, the homeless guy down in the corner, because I used to smelling that guy when they walk by. That's what that would be.
Oh, I let me know what beer it is that you smell that in.
Yeah, we won't be buying it.
Right.
Well, the Cicerone, something Chad and I specifically have talked about doing for since we started this podcast like a year and a half ago or so.
Yeah.
We've talked about doing it off and on, and something we want to do. So, getting somebody on who had it, and just hearing you talk about it, it's really good. It was something we
it's a rejuvenating kind of interview for us, from the Cicerone standpoint, because it was a year and a half ago when we first started talking about doing this podcast. And Adam, I didn't know anything about the Cicerone program at all. He told me about it, and I think we were brewing a beer on a November or December morning.
I think so.
Talking about doing it a year and a half ago, and here we are, still haven't done it. But this has been very informative and rejuvenating.
It's totally doable. You just gotta go about your study in a disciplined way. So, get the list of the books.
It might be a problem.
And make a list of the styles you're not familiar with, and taste through them intentionally. Do side by side tastings. Do off flavor tastings. You do all that stuff, and eventually you'll be ready to go.
Yeah, and I always, try to figure out how I can increase my palate. But you made a really good point of that. It's more of a vocabulary thing, really. Just being able to recognize what you're tasting, and so yeah, I'll be the one going down the grocery store aisle next week, smelling all the.
That's great. It's the best way to do it. And that's really what it is. It's not like it's not like a muscle that you exercise and somehow your nose or your taste buds get stronger. It's vocabulary. It's recognition. It's you're smelling it, whether you think you are or not. It's being able to attach those things.
You just don't know what to call it.
Descriptions. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah. Well, cool. Now, do you homebrew? Have you homebrewed at all?
I have not. I am one of the rare industry professionals who has not homebrewed.
I'm not saying it's a requirement at all. I remember.
Yeah, the Cicerone program certainly encourages it, but I decided when I was preparing, I hadn't done it recreationally, and as I was preparing for the exam, I took an honest evaluation of how I learn best, and I said, you know what, I think I can better spend my time by actually just absorbing this information intellectually rather than doing it hands-on, because I don't really learn very well doing hands-on stuff.
Yeah, I think I think I jumped down a YouTube rabbit hole at some point, and I saw somebody brewing beer, and I remembered. I was like, wait a minute, you can brew this shit at home? Like, I had no idea you could do this. Right. And I immediately just started. I YouTubed the hell out of brewing beer, and I just watched these people do it, and I started buying books and reading. And then another buddy of mine, we went in together and bought all the equipment, and we just started brewing. And since then, it's been all beer all the time. So
yeah, no, and I'd like to start doing it. I would. It's just it's a big time commitment, and time is at a bit of a premium right now. And honestly, like I said, when I was studying for the exam, it was like, yeah, I could sink my time into this, but I can also spend that same amount of time actually gaining the knowledge and the descriptions of this and understand it from that standpoint. And so that's how I went about it. A lot of people would probably think I'm foolish to pursue the advanced exam without doing hands-on brewing. I mean, I have been around for brewing and kind of done this at breweries and stood in on brew days and things like that. But I know how I learn, and whenever I at different jobs and things like that, most people assume that hands-on learning is best. And when you are trying to make me learn something by repetition, by, okay, now I want you to do it, you're wasting your time. Just let me take notes and then study those notes and come and understand it from a more, whole picture standpoint. So that's what I've done. Maybe it's foolish. We'll find out in a year or so.
I think it's great that you're able to recognize how you learn, because for me, I'm the complete opposite. I can't take a note to save my life. I just note taking is not for me. I've tried it in my job and business. I just can't do it. But getting my hands in and doing, and actually doing the work. You could describe how to do something all you want, but until I get my hands on it and do it, that's how I learn. So I don't think it's bad at all. You learn it how you learn it, and if you know how you learn it, that's even better. So kudos, yeah, definitely.
Well, it's always interesting that there's always somebody out there that thinks they know the best way to teach someone
for everybody.
For everybody, yeah.
Right.
It's like this blanket method of this is how you learn, and it's
public
never
school
the case.
systems that we're talking about now.
Yeah.
What's your favorite beer style?
Oh God.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
You call me.
That's a fair question.
It's a fair question, but it's also like asking somebody what's your favorite beer. Like I don't know.
That's tough. So I'll tell you. Okay, we'll go this route. So when I walk into a brewery that I don't have a previous knowledge of, there are, I'm not familiar with their beers at least. And they've got, the entire gamut of beers on their tap board. There are styles that are going to draw my attention first to want to order. So if we're early in the night, I am really a huge fan of Keller beers. So anybody who's got a unfiltered lager on, a more rustic style lager, I'm probably going to start there. I enjoy wit beer. Was one of the first beers when I was really getting into craft beer that made me recognize that I liked Belgian beer. I didn't know why. I didn't understand anything about yeast or anything like that at the time. But I knew that I was consistently enjoying wit beer, and so it's stayed a favorite style of mine. So I'll order that. Munich Helles that has a really beautiful Pilsner malt base to it. I enjoy that. Once we start getting into later in the evening, the stronger beers, if I had to pick one beer culture, it would be Belgium. I've been to Belgium a couple times on beer trips, and I just love their entire brewing culture. So good farmhouse ales, saisons, whether or not that's actually a farmhouse style is up for debate, but the Abbey styles and things like that, I'm big into those. And obviously they're a lot rarer, but I am huge into beers that have foraged ingredients. I love Scratch Brewing. They're in Illinois, and Full Steam in North Carolina, Fontaflora in North Carolina, some others that are really trying to pioneer a new sense of terroir in their beers by using local ingredients. So anybody who is taking a leap, even if it's just one beer, somebody is using local spruce tips in their spring IPA, and everything else they do is more standard. If they're doing something like that, I want to see what they're doing with it. So those tend to be my favorites, but I can enjoy a well-made example of any style. That is my roundabout way of copping out of your question.
Very, very well done. Very well done.
Well, I think it was answered fairly.
Good. I didn't want you to feel like you got ripped off there.
I have I've just recently had a new to me style of Groot or Gruit.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's like a super old.
Yeah, I mean, there was
style?
a time when pretty much all beer was Gruit on some level. It was seasoned with whatever could be found.
Okay. Well, I thought it was good. I mean, it's
was
just
that
amazing. Was that?
Who was it from?
It's a little local brewery just about 15 miles east of me called the Fermentorium.
Oh yeah.
And
I feel like I've heard of that.
they're in Cedarburg,
Huh.
which is right along I-43 between Milwaukee and Green Bay.
Sure.
But yeah, I had never heard of this. I don't this style before, and it's just amazing to me that there are so many styles out there. You mentioned several just in your answer to my question that of styles I've never heard of, and that reminded me about the gruet that I'd had, and it's just interesting that there's so many styles out there. When I think I've had pretty much everything, I probably haven't even had half of everything.
Sure. Yeah. Now you'll never run out of things to learn when it comes to beer. We'll all be learning about this our entire lives. We'll never exhaust what there is to the new things there are to discover.
Well, yeah, and they just keep coming up with more stuff.
Right. Now
you know?
we're just making up styles as we go.
Right.
Exactly. We're throwing out the rule book and everybody's just kind of like mashing everything together. You know, you're getting like dark IPLs and all this stuff. And it's like, what are you doing exactly?
Yeah.
White stouts.
Whatever.
Black IPAs
Black
and white
IPAs.
stouts.
Right. Exactly.
Well, now there was the brewery in New York that they just released it. I think the beer with yeast they found on a
shipwreck.
on a shipwreck. There's a shipwreck from the 1800s.
God, right. Well, one of the things that cracks me up with those, it's not too uncommon to find a brewery who, you know, randomly discovered yeast somewhere. We used yeast that we scraped off of our, you know, our barn or
Right.
whatever it is. And that's fantastic, but they act like they were walking around and they found yeast. And it's like, dude, there's yeast fucking everywhere.
Right.
Like there's yeast
In the
on
air around you.
everything.
Yeah.
There is yeast on you. There is yeast on like your car. There's yeast everywhere. Like you didn't. So there's a brewery near us. I was just talking to a brewer recently, and he was he was off the record, sort of venting about another brewer, and was talking. You know, they had mentioned that they had discovered this yeast somewhere, and like almost like it was like Indiana Jones, and it's just like, oh man, like can you believe we found this? And it's like, dude, there's yeast on everything. Good job.
Nice find.
Before they believed it was the gods that fermented this beer or whatever, they had no clue that the yeast was just, it was there. It was in the air.
Right. In fact, and I'm going to bumble this, so I'm not going to get too specific, but there was a time, I feel like late Middle Ages, when the word that was being used, and I don't remember what country it was, for yeast literally translated to God is good.
Oh, wow. That does
Really?
surprise me.
Yeah, they had no explanation for what was happening. They just knew that if you took the krausen, you know, the foam after fermentation and added it to the next batch, you got more beer. And so it was just kind of a divine intervention.
I mean, okay, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I don't know that I can argue.
Yeah, I can't really argue. I know New Glarus, right? Isn't it Chad New Glarus has the open top fermenters?
Yeah,
I believe they're doing, I think they're doing something open fermentation. Do they have a cool ship there?
I don't know.
That I don't know. I don't know. I know that the sours that they've been making are open air fermentation.
Sure.
That's one that's on our list to hopefully go there this summer. It's supposed to be one of it's always been rated one of the top breweries to visit. And so it's an hour. It's
not
an
for
hour
just
away.
the beer, but from experience perspective.
Yeah, so it's.
I've heard their tour is pretty good. I was there back in the fall and didn't love the tap room experience. I don't want to. You guys should go. I don't want to discourage you from going. I probably should have taken the tour. I've heard they do a really good job with that. But
yeah,
hanging out in their little outdoor, like they've got like a patio, and it's sort of like these fake ruins. Like they've built like these little half walls that look
really?
like, yeah, it looks like, you know, you've stumbled upon a hundreds-year-old Italian villa or something, and it all had a bit of a touristy feel to me. Obviously, their beer's fantastic. I was a little let down just by the experience of being there, but again, I've heard that the tour is awesome, and I didn't take it. So
yeah, okay.
If you take it, let me know how it was.
Now, what do you look for when you go into a tap room? You know, are you looking at? I know, like I said on our show when we were with Three Sheeps, the one thing I like about going to Three Sheeps is that There's always something on their tap that I can't get anywhere else. It's something they don't bottle. It's their experimental stuff. I've been to some tap rooms where you don't have that. What they're tapping is exactly what I get in the store. So it's like, why am I here?
Right.
You know?
Sure. Yeah.
So I look for like that type of stuff. What do you look for? Like what makes a good, tap room visit for you?
I mean, there's a few things. I mean, one is, and it's kind of indefinable because it can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different contexts, but an ambiance that feels like I'm actually experiencing something. I understand why breweries open in strip malls. You need low rent, you need to be able to cover overhead and all that, but it is really hard to sink into the sensory experience of a beer when you're sitting in what used to be a Cricket cell phone store or whatever it was before this. So a building with history is awfully nice. When you've taken over and renovated something that has been lived in for a really long time, that has that sense of ambiance to it, that's enjoyable.
Like Lakefront, their place has a cool story too.
Yeah,
Lakefront and Good City in Milwaukee.
Yeah, for sure. So something like that. Obviously, this should be obvious, but you need to have good beer. I need to not be disappointed by the liquid that you're pouring me. And one of the things, I get weary of IPA everything. But the one time that I will order IPAs is when I'm actually at the source, because there's nothing that drops off in flavor faster in beer than hops. And so getting an IPA that is, straight out of the bright tank or freshly kegged or whatever it is the freshest you're going to get it. So if you've got one of your IPAs on tap, I'm going to look for that in your brewery if I'm actually at the tap room. Also, and I am definitely in the minority on this, I am not a huge fan of the I'm going to the brewery, so I'm going to make 13 new best friends and let's just push all of our tables together thing. Like this whole German beer hall, like just long tables. I get it. I get why places do it. Sometimes I just want to go and, sit with my wife or sit by myself and have a beer and just kind of sink into the experience of being there. And when I am at a table with a bunch of people with their dogs and all of them and their dogs want to become best friends with me, I get a little weary of that. So a place that has that allows for the experience of just sort of sitting back and soaking it in and not everything being frenetic and high energy. I don't begrudge them making money, and obviously they make money by people coming through the door, so they need good business, but a place that allows for a diverse array of experiences when you're in the tap room. So there's a quieter area, there's a bar, there's a higher energy area, all that sort of different things. So I can pick what I'm up for on a given evening. That goes a long way to making that a place that I can, take a gamble on coming back to on another night when I'm not sure what your crowd's going to be like.
Yeah, for sure.
And we had an experience a few weeks ago at a brewery on the north side of Chicago. Yeah. That was just like, I kind of felt like the beer was just kind of meh. It was okay. Yeah. We went there because we've had some of the good barrel aged stuff, but they didn't have any of it. Everything else that we tried was okay, but it felt like we were in like a converted Goodwill store or something.
Oh, yeah.
And
right. I didn't even think about it that way. That's true.
It just didn't have the right atmosphere.
And there was zero
really
energy.
Enjoy it.
There was zero energy in the place. That's the other thing.
Yeah,
sure.
If you wanted to be by yourself, this was the place to do it. Nobody would have bugged you at all. It was dead.
Yeah,
energy wise. So,
yeah. Also, one thing to look for is are there regulars? Are there locals? Like if I feel like all this is out of towners, obviously you can't control who comes into your brewery, and if you're a draw for people coming from a long way away, I can't begrudge you that. But I want to see that the people in your community have supported you, that this is a place that they feel comfortable and that they feel like represents them. So when I can, obviously that's a little bit intangible to define, but when I can tell that there are people here who this is their place, that goes a long way to making me kind of buy in more to what your taproom experience is.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because my wife and I recently went up to Three Sheeps to pick up. We got some of their barrels from them. We bought some barrels from them. We're turning our dining room into a pub room because we don't use a dining room for anything. So it's better to turn it into a pub room. So we got these barrels, and we were there right when they opened their doors. I think it was like 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. And there were 4 other guys there, old timers, man. And they were there with their crowlers and growlers coming to get their fill. Like everybody knew their name. They were like the regulars. Everybody knew who they were, what they were going to get. So it was very interesting to see that they're right there when the door opened. So
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, well, David, we're running a little bit long here, but it's okay. But we definitely want to give you an opportunity here to plug what you actually do.
Sure.
So, on your website, you list that you do classes and tastings. Or I just want to go through what you do real quick, just so everybody can kind of know where to find you.
Yeah, sure. So as you've said, I'm a craft beer journalist and educator. So I write for most of the big national beer publications, both in print and online. I write for Beer Advocate. Just started writing for Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. I write for craftbeer.com, porchdrinking.com. I write for some regional food and beer publications like Ohio Magazine and Edible Ohio Valley, just some stuff here in the area that kind of covers the Ohio scene. And then I'm always looking for kind of unusual venues to get beer into. So I write for Civil Eats, which is just a fantastic publication online, civileats.com. They look at the intersection of food and food production with ethics and politics. I've done a couple pieces for them on beer, on sustainability. I wrote about them, or wrote for them about Sierra Nevada's Resilience IPA and kind of the charitable giving within craft beer. And then I do a lot of events in the area. So I lead beer tastings at breweries and beer bars. I lead pairings, whether that's full-scale dinners or more themed pairings like beer and chocolate, beer and cheese, beer and cookies, beer and pie, whatever it is. And then I lead a lot of educational classes around the area. This might surprise you, but public libraries are eating beer up right now. I've got
really
more than half a dozen public library systems that pay me to come in and do monthly or quarterly beer classes for their patrons. So come in, and every month we'll pick a different style family or national tradition or whatever it is, talk about the history of it, and then taste through some beer examples of it. So I do a lot of that. And then I'm starting to get into some more interesting, I shouldn't say more interesting, but more unusual events. I'm doing one this weekend that is we're calling it a sensory camp. It's bringing together experts on beer, bourbon, cheese, chocolate, and coffee. And we're going to be giving breakout talks throughout the day. Oh, it's awesome. We're going to be giving talks throughout the day on not so much the technical aspects of tasting, but really diving into the deeper level stuff of like, why do we enjoy what we taste and how do we enjoy it more? How does what we taste affect how we think and how we feel and how we relate to other people, and kind of getting people to really buy into the fact that our senses interact with our higher level functioning and vice versa. So it's going to be an all-day event, and I am super excited about it. So that's kind of what I do. I split my time pretty evenly between the writing and the events. They both take up about half my time. You can find all of my events listed on my website at davidnilsenbeer.com. You can also find links to all of my published beer writing on there. And then on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, you can also find me at davidnilsenbeer.com. So on all those different platforms, I do different things. So if you're active on those, please do follow me on there. And then again, on my website, you can find all of the information for my events and writing as well.
Well, man, do you ever record any of these and like put them on online, YouTube, or anything like that?
I have not yet, but it's a thing that I have been looking at starting to do. I am, if we can figure out the logistics for it, I'm going to try to record one of my talks this Saturday. So I can't guarantee that will make it up, but if we can make it happen, I'm going to try to get that out there so you might be able to see that.
Yeah, that's when you were talking about with the chocolate, whatever it was. That one sounds fascinating.
The beer, the bourbon, the chocolate, the cheese, everything that sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and just the talk of
kind of just a total like holistic hedonism of just indulging all of these things that people love anyway. You know, everybody loves chocolate. Everybody loves
enjoy them together.
Beer and cheese and coffee and all this stuff. But a lot of times people don't really think about them in a deeper way. So just kind of taking people to that next level with it. And I'll be in that talk, I'm going to be talking about a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier about our sensory context and how that influences our flavor vocabulary. So hopefully we'll be able to get that video online so you can see it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, the sensory stuff, that's really interesting to me as well.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much, man.
This was awesome.
We could have gone, we could have talked for a long time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I know I ran a little over, but I enjoyed talking with you guys. So
no, don't worry about it. We were just to be honest with you, Adam and I were texting back and forth here in the last half hour. So like we were saying, like we could talk to this guy all night long. So,
well, then
we'll have to do this again sometime.
And then we were just like, I don't have another beer, and the fridge is over there, and I can't get to the other beer. It's like, I'm out of beer.
That's a terrible problem.
Next time I plan ahead and bring more beer with me to the room. So
there you
go. David, thanks again so much. Everybody, everywhere you said, follow him, David Nilsen Beer. Go check him out. Definitely. If you're
we'll put the
links
in Ohio in the description too on YouTube.
If you're in the Ohio area, go check him out for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let me know if you're coming through the area. I'll give you some tips, or maybe we can meet up or something.
Definitely. Sweet.
Sounds
thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, David. Have a good night.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
That's a lot to think about. Like sometimes you answer and I'm like, I'm so processing what you just fucking said. Give me a second.
There was a lot of information, and early in the interview, the questions he took and just kind of ran with them, and I wanted to kind of interrupt and ask a question about something specific, but at the same time, I was like, no, this is really interesting. I just want to let him keep going because
need a piece of paper to write down like, okay, we said this. I need to remember to ask him this, but yeah. It was good. I wanted to have him on because, as we've talked about taking the Cicerone, so it's the numbers that he gave, right? It's hard to find somebody who's Cicerone certified that you can really sit down and talk to, right? And although we didn't really dig in very deeply, he still kind of answered everything I really was wondering. How do you build that palette, right? And I never even thought of. And he's so right when he says it. It's funny when people say things, you're like, well, shit. Yeah, you're right. Like, I'm an idiot. I was thinking of it too hard. But he said, you know what you're tasting. You just don't know the words to put to it, right?
Right. And that's like, one thing I was worried about in us talking about doing the Cicerone program because I was like, I'm going to fail at this. I'm not going to be able to tell what orange rind smelled like.
Or as some beer podcasts will say, it's a 3-week-old banana that's been sitting out in the sun for about 2.5 hours. Like, shut the fuck up. You don't know that shit. But yes, that type of stuff. And I think the idea is like, would have asked anyway, how does one go about training their palate or teaching, themselves? And he's right. Like, go through, the produce and it's like, I've never had this fruit before. I don't know what that fruit tastes like. Okay, buy one and try it out, So.
Yeah. I mean, sniff everything. People are going to look at you like, what the fuck are you doing? But
get your nose out of it.
Does it really matter what other people think that you're doing?
Never has.
No.
Never has. That was a great time. It sucks that he's in Ohio, not close enough for me to go to any of his events.
Yeah.
But I'll keep watching his I didn't know he was in Wisconsin. I don't know if he did an event up here, but if he's close, definitely go check it out.
Yeah, for sure. If he's got something in our area, either one of our areas.
And David, if you are listening to this part, if you need any help with all YouTube and stuff, I mean, I'm your guy. I can help you out with any of that.
Adam knows YouTube like.
I get this shit up on the internet pretty quickly. So
yeah.
But yeah, that was great Jake, sorry you missed it, dude. Hopefully we can get him back on. I'm sure we can get him back.
Oh
on.
Yeah. We can certainly do a part 2 because I think there's a lot more stuff to talk about.
There's a lot more, yeah, for sure. David, thank you so much for joining us again. We appreciate it.
It was awesome.
Great. I'll be thinking about this for probably a couple of days, and I'll be sniffing all the stuff down the Walmart aisle.
I don't know if I do it down Walmart.
Not the people.
You might want to go to like a real grocery store.
Yeah, it's too far away. And the people at Walmart don't care. The people at those other grocery stores might care and be like, sir, that's the oregano. Can you please put that back? And I'm sniffing. I'm worried about beer. Leave me the fuck alone. All right. Well, I think we did it, right? We're done at this point?
I think we did another one, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to play the song anyway, even though there's not 3 of us.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll play the song anyway. All right. We'll see you later, Chad.
Later.
We're the 3 best friends that anyone could have. We're the 3 best friends that anyone can have. And we're always gonna hang out.